Across the country, Year 12 students are finishing their final exams and turning their attention possibly to university. But there are increasing concerns that students are resorting to unethical behaviour to achieve top marks. Educational experts and former students say the pressure to get into the top universities, especially in New South Wales, is causing some students to resort to extreme measures, like paying tutors to write their assessment tasks and exam essays. They also say there's a culture of rote learning and memorising essays for exams, and that sometimes those essays are purchased from other students. In a moment, we'll hear from the President of the Board of Studies in New South Wales and the Vice-Chancellor of Macquarie University. But first, a special report from Suzanne Smith.
You're the top. You're an arrow colour. You're the top. You're the Aussie colour.
And top is what most students are striving for in this year's HSC exams in New South Wales.
Dutch master, your Mrs. Astor, your Pepsodent.
The pressure to get into courses at university is causing some students and parents to act in unethical and immoral ways.
It's a product of supply and demand, largely, at the moment. If you have a lot of people trying to get into the same courses, the courses are going to be really hard to get into, and as a result, people are going to go to extreme measures to get the marks they need for those courses.
Some of those extreme measures include offer a tutor money to write your assessments and essays for the HSC. For HSC English, there are assessment tasks that make up 50% of your mark. One is a creative writing project. The other 50% is made up of essays written in the exam. For the last 2 years, students were asked to critique their chosen text in relation to the notion of belonging. Angus Hannam tutors students from Sydney's elite private and selective public schools. He says the predictable nature of the English question does encourage unethical behaviour in some students.
Do you know any tutors that have been phoned by parents and asked to write essays that their children can memorise?
Yeah, I am aware of that happening.
Do you actually know tutors that that's happened to?
Yes, I do, without mentioning any names. But yeah, I think it's pretty unethical, to be honest, pretty dishonest. But I've had sort of a couple of requests, I guess. But I guess there's some tutors who will do that, and for money, and for quite a lot of money.
And we had one.
Dr Kim Jaggar is the principal of Sydney Boys High, one of the state's top selective high schools. He says the state's top corruption watchdog looked into the problem but couldn't find enough evidence for a conviction.
It's controlling it is the problem, that you end up getting the best assessment product that money can buy. So that's got to be inequitable.
Obtain an essay that received full marks in the trial, copy it and memorise it for the HSC exam.
The culture of memorising essays for English is out of control, isn't it, would you say?
Yeah, it is. That's the only real way of going well at the moment, I would have to say. And is
everyone doing it?
Not everyone, but the vast majority. I wouldn't have any figures, but I'd have to say that the vast majority are. And because they obviously want to do well, so they use a tactic which makes them do well.
The students do know that it's fairly easy to adapt from one year to the next, and some excellent answers that have been prepared previously by great students who might have a thumb drive or a CD to give or sell to you. It's in your own interests to acquire them and do something about learning them and improving your score. So the answer to the question is that yes, it's prevalent, and yes, it's a problem.
This essay that allegedly got full marks in the August trial HSC exam went viral across New South Wales. It contains the so-called buzzwords that students memorise, like segueing nexus and discourses. Dr Kim Jaggar says the English paper needs to change.
People who assess what you write are being driven by a rubric which explains the kind of language that's got to be used in order to get the various bands, and therefore you learn faster how to play the game. And so I think that produces a sort of decadence about the examining process rather quickly. We've got to go back to the days when there were some surprises in the questions.
Dr Kim Jaggar says students today don't believe this behaviour of copying and rote learning is wrong.
The idea of intellectual property itself is changing. It started with downloading music or whatever. That people now see information as not being something so personal, as being international. And in a sense, what right do you have to think that you own it anymore?
But Marcell Rozsa says schools have a conflict of interest. They need their rank to stay high, which means the students must do well.
Do any of your teachers encourage you to memorise and rote learn?
They try and tell us that we aren't meant to, and I think that's the best way of doing it. At the beginning of the year, they say, don't do it because they might throw a bad question at you. But then implicitly, through how they teach, through what they teach and why they teach it, they are encouraging us to, rote learn those essays.
West of Sydney, in the Blue Mountains, KOROWAL school teachers are setting up for the HSC exams. The teachers form a guard of honour as students enter the hall. The coordinator of KOROWAL School, Mark Thomas, says students who rely on rote learning and memorising essays don't do well in later life.
The children that get into this mode of competition and realising all the sources, as they move through the university system, they keep doing it. And then they get into the workplace and they keep doing it. And eventually they get caught out. I mean, I have friends who teach in universities. This is a big problem.
Pay for intensive tutoring, which includes teaching on future parts of the syllabus to get ahead of your class. Harry Heo is vice-captain at Sydney Boys High. He attends a coaching college on the weekends. He is aiming high, Commerce Law at Sydney University, then the Harvard Business School. He says he got the idea from his parents. He needs 99.79 out of 100 to reach his goal, which means tutoring is essential.
I was pretty recent towards the science and math for tutoring because I guess it helps because everyone else is doing it and it gives you a head start.
Harry says he has to memorise his English essay for the HSC on belonging. It is the only way to get the marks he needs.
Do you memorise your essays?
I do memorise some of my essays, especially for English.
What if the question is a surprise? What would you do?
If the question is a surprise, I guess an exam technique is you get the question, this is specifically for memorising, and then you look at the question, think about how you're going to adapt it, and make sure your structure is actually going to answer the question.
So, doing the first step, Sharon, that would be R says theta times R says theta.
The competition to succeed is causing many parents to resort to coaching colleges.
I think there's more multiculturalism now, parents from different backgrounds. We've got a lot of students of Asian backgrounds. Some of them are Australian born, some of them are overseas students, predominantly Australian born. Their parents are not Australian born and they want their child to have a better life than they did.
Robert Price says there has been a change in parental attitudes in the last 20 years.
From the 90s onwards, it's been more about giving students a competitive edge. Without any doubt, tutoring will give them that.
Even children from schools that charge at least $25,000 a year in fees come to this college. Principal of SCEGGS Darlinghurst, one of Sydney's best private girls' schools, Jenny Allum, is concerned that some girls at her school get extra coaching.
As a general rule, a SCEGGS girl should not need any tutoring at all. We have very experienced and committed teachers here who will help you. And I think that what drives it is the anxiety of girls and parents to try to get ahead of the rest.
When it's in small class groups who are being exposed to curriculum in advance of their peers to try to get an edge, it seems to me total waste of money. And it seems to me to be a shame to subject students who should be growing and learning and kicking a ball around or playing sport, for them to be subjected to this kind of treatment, is what I call it, being held in a room against their will for several hours on a Saturday to get ahead of the game.
Dr. Kim Jaggar believes the coaching industry is out of control.
I think there's a fair bit of unscrupulous behaviour going on. It's pretty endemic, and I think that if you're going to run a coaching college, we should know who's running it, who are the people who are teaching or coaching in it.
Really, if we could have a dialogue between the schools and tutors and tutoring organisations, that could only be a good thing.
But while the panic and stress about academic results is obsessing some parents in the metropolitan cities, the situation in remote and lower socio-economic areas is very different.
But if baby I'm the bottom, you're the top.
Suzanne Smith, Late Line.